Assalamu alaikum and a very warm welcome to this special show on gender-based violence. I'm Tayyaba Nasar Khan and you're watching PTV World. In the light of recent events that took place, it feels like there is a femicide taking place in Pakistan. Noor, Saima, Kuratalan and so many other women and the members of trans community out there have become a victim of this brutality. According to a report released on International Women's Day by SSDO, alarming figures of gender-based violence were witnessed only within the first year and the year of 2020 in itself, and earlier on as well. It showed that rape cases and cases of violence against women had doubled in the last 6 months of 2020 in comparison to the first 6 months of 2020. Similarly, child abuse cases were reported 3 times more in the second half of 2020. This isn't just violence against women and the trans community, but this is a violence against entire humanity in itself. With so many cases of boys, both children and older, being assaulted emerging, the situation is frightening, to say the least. Now, gender-based violence, something extremely un-Islamic, by the way, refers to harmful acts directed at an individual based on their gender. It is rooted in gender inequality, the abuse of power, and harmful societal and family norms. It is estimated that 1 in 3 women around the world will experience sexual or physical violence in their entire lifetime. Now, gender-based violence can include sexual, physical, mental, and economic harm inflicted in public or in private. It also includes threats of violence, coercion, and manipulation. Gender-based violence can be in the form of child marriage, female genital mutilation, honor killings, traffickings, or sex or slavery as well, for that matter, intimate partner violence, physical punishment, sexual emotions, or psychological violence as well. Now, gender-based violence has terrible consequences, both short-term and long-term, with mental effects and mental health issues being one of the primary aftermath. A lot of studies have shown that gender-based violence causes high suicide rates among women and the trans community. And this, ladies and gentlemen, has significantly increased after COVID-19 induced lockdowns, which were enforced around the world. The news of the past 2-3 weeks has been horrifying, to say the least, in Pakistan. All the headlines in itself could put one under mental duress. In this special episode, in this special show by PTV World, we will talk about gender-based violence, what causes it, its impacts, the status of gender-based violence in Pakistan, and the legislation to encounter this long-existing pandemic. We have been joined by an esteemed panel to dissect this issue. After a short break, we'll be back with our first segment, where we will talk to the Federal Minister of Human Rights, Dr. Shiri Mazari, on gender-based violence in Pakistan and the legislative process to counter it. Stay tuned for more. Welcome back and thank you for joining us in our special show on gender-based violence. We're here with the Federal Minister of Human Rights, Dr. Shiri Mazari, who is kind enough to join us. She has taken her education from London School of Economics as well as doing her doctorate from Columbia University. And she's very, very vocal about her support for women and also trans people as well. She's very vocal about that, and she has also been reportedly said that her ministry will stand behind every woman who demands and fights for her rights. And we're very, very happy to be in her presence and to ask her questions regarding that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so you have stated, reportedly stated, that you're going to stand behind every woman. Your ministry is going to stand behind every woman. How important is the leadership position for a woman in order to make these decisions, these big decisions, and to stand behind all those who are affected, victims or survivors?
I think it's very, very essential that we make it clear to everybody that we, not just us in our ministry or me as a minister, but that our government is committed to supporting women, their protection, their rights, and ensuring that any violence or any sort of abuse of women or any deprivation of the rights of women is taken notice of and dealt with firmly, because we have the laws in place. And the issue is of enforcing laws and of making people aware of those laws. So that is our commitment, and that's a commitment that our ministry has to carry out. And in any case, as a woman, I feel that in Pakistan, women have often been neglected. Everybody talks about women's rights, everybody talks about how our constitution gives women rights. People talk about the respect and dignity that our religion provides for women. But when it comes to actual actions, we find that women unfortunately suffer. They suffer from violence at home. They suffer from cultural norms which are in fact against our religion, like karokari, gender-based violence, denial of property rights, which are not only enshrined in our laws and our constitution, but also in our religion. So when it comes to actual facts on the ground, we are not really fulfilling the commitments that we are obligated to fulfill.
Absolutely. You just mentioned how our laws are there, they're in place. There's a constitution, there's a Pakistan Penal Code. There's also so many other laws that are protecting women's rights and trans rights as well. So let's talk about, is there an issue in the implementation? You also mentioned this right now. But also, is there an issue in the intrinsic network of our society, in the net of our society, where we ensure that there is patriarchy and misogyny present, which disallows the women to raise her voice?
This is a fact, unfortunately. And we would be living in a fool's paradise if we didn't admit it. And one of the biggest issues is this sort of claim that somehow chadar char diwari, that the home, within the walls of the home, the woman can be abused, the woman can be beaten up, and the state has no right to intervene. This is absolute rubbish. The state has a right to intervene wherever the law is broken. And the home is no exception to that. But unfortunately, what we are not able to see changing, and which we need to change, is mindsets of people. The feeling that the vulnerable members of our society, and they're not just women, you mentioned transgenders, they also face abuse and discrimination. People with disabilities feel that, children are abused. So we have to make sure that these vulnerable people are given the protection and the rights that they have, and that as a state and as a government, we're obligated to ensure that they get those rights, they get that protection. And in that sense, I think that especially physical abuse of women has to stop. The sort of rape, murder, gang rape, all this has to be dealt with very strictly, because we cannot have a society where 51% of the population, which is women, are discriminated against and abused and violated.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about how you just mentioned that there's karokari, there's denial of women's rights, and that is against Islamic norms as well. And right now there's this domestic violence bill that everybody's talking about as well, which is in the Council of Islamic Ideology as well.
No, it's not. Let me make a correction. Okay. First, all the 4 provinces already have domestic violence laws.
Yes.
What we discovered was that in the Federal capital territory, there is no law against domestic violence, which is why we drafted a bill. It went through an enormous process of vetting and scrutiny. A government bill on any issue goes through multiple processes. First, the Cabinet in principle approves the bill, then it is sent to the Cabinet Committee on Legislation, the CCLC, where each line of that draft is vetted, seen whether it's legally okay, whether it is not in violation of any of our constitutional provisions. And the Constitution says clearly no law that's against Islam can be brought into place. So it went through all that process. It was final, and by the way, the Human Rights Committee of the Assembly, which is headed by the opposition, Bilawal Zardari, that took 8 months before they approved, made changes and approved.
Why so long?
Unfortunately, a lot of our bills get delayed in the committees, especially in committees headed by the opposition, but I don't want to get into the political aspect. Then it came back to the National Assembly. The bill was passed unanimously. by the National Assembly. Nobody had any objections to it. Then it went to the Senate. The Senate Human Rights Committee made more changes in it. Had they made no changes and had the Senate passed it without changes, it would have gone directly to the President for signing into law. Because changes were made in the committee, then also in the Senate itself, and then it was passed. And again, it was passed with 2 senators only objecting at that time. And then it was, happens, it was sent back to the National Assembly. By then, a hue and cry came about that this is transgressing Islamic principles. There is nothing in the bill that, why would we bring a bill that would go against our religious...
Being in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
And the other thing is, it's not as if it came suddenly, it was not even an ordinance. As I've explained, it took over a year to finally get through. And then, because there was a hue and cry, the parliamentary SAPM wrote to the Speaker that perhaps the Council of Islamic Ideology should be consulted. But for that to happen, for any bill to go at this stage, especially when it's been passed by both houses, to go to the council, you have to have it voted upon in the National Assembly, and it has to be supported by 1/5 of the total members of the Assembly. So actually it has not happened yet. It has not been put to a vote, and therefore it remains with the National Assembly right now. So that is, but we in our ministry, the Council of Islamic Ideology, Qibla Ayaz Saab, who's head of it, and their research director who looks at laws, they approached us, and we've had they've had meetings with our people, and we asked them that please point out what articles of the bill you find are contrary to Islam. So far they have not been able to give us any argument. They said give us more time to look at the bill, so we've given them another week or so, and they will get back to us. But so far nothing as such in the bill has been found contrary to anything that our religion teaches us and or the precepts of Islam. There are some people have social issues with some of the provisions, but those are not anti-Islam. Those are, so I mean, the assumption that a father has full control of their child as long as they're living in the house, and therefore they can beat them, they can do anything. That has nothing to do with our religion.
Exactly.
This is a social belief that some households have, because our bill is not only for women, by the way, it's a domestic violence bill.
Exactly.
So it's violence against children. If you have a joint family system, it could be any member of that family, whether it's old parents or in-laws. So children, women, could even be a man who a wife uses violence against or harasses. So
it happens.
It's not gender specific. It's being assumed it's a gender specific law. No, it is to prevent domestic violence, violence in the home. And we know now, with so many surveys have been done, that children get abused primarily in homes and within families. So this is a law that provides added protection for all vulnerable members in a domestic household.
Okay, wonderful. So that is a hope for the people of Federal Capital Islamabad as well. Okay, let's move on to the drugs issue. There are so many issues that are directly related with gender-based violence, and we see that that has been caused by drugs or psychological issues. Now, of course, we are not going to put entirely the onus on psychological or drug issue. The person himself is a perpetrator of the violence. But how can we curb drugs and psychological issues? Is there any rehabilitation of the people who perpetrate these violence in order to ensure that this is narrowed down to, or maybe this is basically completely eliminated?
I think there are two different issues, and I really think we should be careful before we link the two.
Okay.
Because you're giving a free pass to murderers. Drugs is definitely an issue in our society, as in every society. Drugs have become rampant in colleges and schools, in all sorts of social environments, from the poor to the very rich. And then there are all these manufactured drugs, whether it's ecstasy or ice or whatever, and certainly people take them. But that is another problem which we do need to deal with, and very strongly, especially our youth. And one of the ways that you counter drugs in youth is to provide them with sporting facilities, engage them in other physical activities like sports, like public service, social service, and take them away from drugs. When children have, youth have nothing to do, when they're unemployed also, then they resort a lot to drugs. So that is a very big issue that we have to deal with. But that is separate from the crime of murder or abuse of vulnerable, especially women and children.
But Zahir Jaffer had used drugs extensively, and he had a ring as well, and he also enabled other people to cause violence with the help of drugs as well.
Listen, the fact in the case so far is that he was not drugged out when he committed the violence.
Not at that time, yes.
He was
absolutely
in total, in his senses totally. So I think one should just not even, that is something else he can be charged with, but this is a case of brutal murder, no less.
I think this is very important to highlight over here, that this is a case of brutal murder and not just related with drugs or anything else, because our Prime Minister Imran Khan, he has also highlighted that we are going to go to the perpetrators, we're going to ensure that justice is served towards Noor Muqaddam and her family as well. So thank you for pointing that out.
By the way, there are many other women who've also been treated in this way. There's the case of Saima, there's Kuratulan. I mean, almost every day you hear there was a couple that was hanged publicly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. There was a little girl who was raped, beaten and thrown, her body was thrown in a nala in Korangi and Sindh. So it's across the country, and we just, the people say, has violence increased? It may well have increased, but what is now a certainty is that more cases are coming to light because of social media.
Yes.
A lot of things that were hidden, and so public outcry never happened, is now people are rising and speaking against it, these crimes, because there's more publicity, they're more public now. I just want to tell you, for example, you know, a lot of younger people don't realize that the brutal murder of Noor is not the first that happened in Islamabad. In 1998, Nina Aziz was butchered. Her body was, head was thrown in a park, and her body was butchered and kept in a cupboard in her apartment. She was around the same age as Noor. So that was a case that hardly got any publicity. Uswat, I think there was no, the private channels weren't there, the social media was not there, so it never got the sort of attention and reaction to it by the authorities that it should have gotten. So I'm just putting things in perspective, that this has happened before, not just in parts, rural parts or in smaller towns and cities, but in your capital.
Okay, let's talk about how COVID-19 has affected a lot of domestic violence. It has increased domestic violence, not just against women, but also against trans people and men as well. So how are we going to ensure that this reduces? Can we call this an endemic in Pakistan? Or, as a matter of fact, a pandemic, because 1 in 3 women are likely to get affected by gender-based violence in the entire world.
This is, in fact, all over the world, there is now an established fact that violence, domestic violence, has increased during the COVID pandemic. What we did in our ministry at an early stage, we have a helpline, 1099. We attached an app to that, especially for violence, not just GBV, but for all types of violence, but of course focusing on domestic violence, because we realized that a lot of people who were vulnerable in homes would not be able to call for help because the perpetrator would be there in the home as well, especially when there were smart lockdowns around the country. So the app, if you download it, and most people have smartphones, and we are trying to advertise as much as we can, you just press one button on it. You don't have to speak. You dial a number and then you press one button, and that will get you the aid. Warning will go to the police and to our helpline, so we will be able to follow it up. So that's one of the things we've done. The other thing we've done, of course, is to try and create more awareness. You've been referring to transgenders. We have one of the most progressive transgender laws in the entire world. We are one of the very few countries, even the European countries don't do this. We allow a separate identity on our national ID cards and on passports for transgenders. And unlike some other countries, we allow the transgender to choose their identity. The issue is not that we don't have the law. Again, it's enforcement. Now we've made rules for the transgender law, because every law can't really be operationalized till you make the rules for it. So the rules are in place. We're at the end of August, we should have our transgender center where transgenders can come and complain. The Prime Minister has made it a priority that all transgenders should get the health card, get a special access to the SAS program. And also, of course, we've established a special transgender ward in PIMS. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's being used for the COVID emergency, but we've done that. We also have a transgender point person working in our ministry, and she was working in Pindi before with the police. Reem, she's now come to us.
Exactly, we have her on the show as well.
Yeah, but before this, we had another transgender, and we took her in an international delegation for the CEDAW meeting.
Oh, wonderful.
That's when we discovered that the Europeans don't have a separate passport provision or visa provision for transgenders. So that was it showcased to the world that we are way ahead of many other countries, that she was part of our official delegation. The problem with transgenders is that a lot of them don't want to identify as transgenders on their ID cards. And the reason for that is because then they cannot get visas for pilgrimage.
Oh.
So we're trying to, we've asked the PM to see if he can do that, because if you don't have an ID card, you can't have access to a health card,
Exactly.
you can't have
SAS
access
program.
to the SAS program. So what we want to encourage is for transgenders, and we hope the media will help us, really need to get their national ID cards to be able to get the benefits that the government and state is now providing to them.
Okay, wonderful. So I have two last questions. One is, how can we ensure that Islamic seminaries and Islamic madrasas are in line with the government and ensure that there is a lot of campaign against gender-based violence, and they've spearheaded as well. So, and the last question is, how important is for women to be known as a being rather than a sister or a daughter or a wife?
You're using the line I use in my speeches in the assembly, where clearly when they talk about, okay, we have to protect our sisters and our mothers and our daughters.
Exactly.
And my point is, no, we are women first and foremost. It does not matter if you're somebody's wife or daughter or mother. You need to be respected and given your rights as a woman.
Absolutely.
And that is the starting point. You talked about seminaries and madrasas. I think the law applies to everybody. And in that sense, I do want to add that we've had a lot of support in getting our message across from the Council of Islamic Ideology. Qibla Ayaz has made different video statements for women inheritance, for violence against women, and for child abuse. So we do get help from them, and they are very helpful, because this is a cause that they also need to further and believe in, because it's preventing this sort of abuse and violence is part of our religious duty as well.
Absolutely. It is a part of our religious duty. It is a part of our duty as a national of Pakistan, as a patriot of Pakistan, because Pakistan is a place which has to ensure that women are protected, trans people are protected, men are protected, children are protected, be it girls or boys, because Pakistan is a place which provides sanctity to all those who seek refuge, and that is where we have also come from. We also want to highlight at the end that of this segment, of course, that do download the app that Dr. Shiri Mazari was talking about. 1099 is the helpline number. We'll be back with our second segment, where we will talk to Ms. Nighat and also Reem Sharif and talk about more on gender-based violence. Thank you. Welcome back to the episode, the special show on gender-based violence. We were talking earlier to the ministers as well, and we are here gathered with the other women in the studio, with a trans woman who has come and joined us as well, and also with a very famous personality who talks about digital rights as well. And before moving on, let's talk a little about the statistics of gender-based violence. So in the first 6 months of 2018, about 66 women were murdered only in Faisalabad. Moreover, 141 reported
cases were also seen on child abuse as well, child sexual abuse as well. And this is an issue which we have to address. This is an issue we have to talk about as Pakistanis in order to move forward. And for that, we have esteemed guests as well in a panel as well. So the first up, the guest is Ms. Nighat. She is a Pakistani lawyer and she's the executive director of Digital Rights Foundation. She's also an activist who talks a lot about women empowerment and who has won accolades as well. She has won the Atlantic Council Freedom of Expression Award. She's also won the Human Rights Tulip Award for her work as well. So welcome to PTV World for joining us on this very important show. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Nighat. Okay, so
Thank you so much for.
Perfect. So we are also joined in our studio by Sharif. She is a trans woman who's fighting her life. She's fighting through in this world of barbarism, in this world where people do not respect other human beings as their own. So she is the in charge of the Tahaffuz program, where she is the Trans Victim Support Officer at Rawalpindi Police. This is an initiative of Rawalpindi Police as well, and of course, her own brainchild as well. Welcome to the studio, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Taiba.
Okay, so we're going to talk about gender-based violence, of course, in this show. Let's go to Ms. Nighat. Ms. Nighat, you are the person who talks about digital rights. You're a person who's a pioneer of women's rights as well in the digital space and otherwise as well. There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of harassment. Right now, we've seen Noor Muqaddam case. We have seen so many other cases coming up as well. People on the online space, they are like warriors. What they do is they just go and start blaming the victim, blaming the survivor. Do you think this is intrinsic in our society, and how should we overcome that?
Yeah, I definitely feel that, like what people say online is actually reflecting their mindset, in the offline patriarchal society. And especially not just with Noor Muqaddam case, if you look back and see, several victims of violence who have been honor killed and who were very bold and outspoken in their using of online spaces or internet, they were victim blamed. And the question always comes from people, majority of people is like, what that person was doing there, why she was wearing those clothes. And I think in during this entire conversation and narratives that usually being built in the online space, we often forget that the blame belongs to the perpetrator. The entire focus sort of transfers onto the victim and survivor instead of looking into what perpetrator has done. And I think that's what the I would say the behavior and attitude of the entire society. And I would say that irrespective of class, to be very honest, it's not just when we talk about that, oh, so this is something that is happening more in villages or far-flung areas. No, absolutely not. This is also something that we see in our own circles. The circles where, the elite circles, entertainment industry, like I don't think that there is any segment of society or any class of society which is immune to this epidemic, the silencing culture that we usually see, especially after high profile cases.
Exactly. You just said that patriarchy is intrinsic in our society. You also talked about how it's not just related to the rural area, but also to the urban areas as well. So we see the Usman Mirza case that just happened as well, the motorway case as well, which were in the urban areas as well. So I want to understand, why is there not gender-sensitive reporting on these issues? Because, of course, all the broadcast media, the digital media, they talk about the moral character of the victim, the survivor, and they do not talk about the person who's perpetrating that issue. So how important is a social media movement, number one? And number two, how important is gender-sensitive reporting?
You see, I'm so glad that you folks are doing this, program in such a detail and actually listening to us while giving us an opportunity to talk about this issue in detail. What we have seen, different programs on different TV channels, and there is like this mushroom growth of YouTube channels as well, where the sensationalism always takes preference over the ethical media reporting. And it's not that people who are reporting this, they absolutely have no idea what ethical media reporting is or what gender sensitization is. Number of trainings have been given to different media houses, different journalists. But I also see that the way the sensationalist content sort of gets attention of people, and then it gets viral, and then people gets follower, and I think that's where now the ethics lie, what we are seeing here especially. And I definitely feel that it's not why usually we activists, when we talk about addressing gender based violence, we say okay, what society is doing, what criminal justice system is doing, what law enforcement is doing, what government is doing, and we often forget what media is doing, right? And I think it's so important to we cannot really leave media and sort of see them in isolation, because the kind of role that they are playing, social media or internet, the internet penetration in Pakistan is just around 30%, right? So the rest of the Pakistani population is dependent on your mainstream media. So what mainstream media or TV channels are showing to people, right? So they are creating this narrative, they are making up this mindset or reinforcing gender stereotypes or patriarchal norms. So I think it's very important that we really need to talk about the ethical journalism and also gender sensitized media reporting. I have seen in matters of honor killing, in matters of rape, sexual assault, even very reputable media houses and newspapers just release the personal information of the victims and
Exactly.
survivors. And I'm like, there is like a really basic ethic of preserving the privacy and dignity of of the survivor and victim. So this is like the basic guideline. So you just imagine when media violates the privacy and dignity of victim and survivor while disclosing identifiable information. Imagine what else they do when it comes to report on all these issues.
Exactly, and that is yellow journalism. That isn't even ethical journalism at all. That is yellow journalism, and it should be defined and recognized as yellow journalism. So you talked about the justice system, criminal justice system as well. I'm going to come back to you, but let's go to Reem now. Reem, you are somebody who is also a part of National Youth Council. You've been selected in that as well. You took oath recently, and you have been the in charge of the Tahaffuz program, protecting other trans women in Islamabad and Rawalpindi as well. So I want to ask about your journey. We know that, trans people were given the status of a third gender in 2009, which is very late. And also there are about 10,000 trans people who are currently present. And there were, in 2018 alone, there were more than 400 reported cases just in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So I want to know that how has your journey been like? What was the psychological impact in growing in a family who did not want to accept you? And also, being the strong person that you are now and helping other trans women.
Thank you so much, Tayuba, for bringing this important topic in front of audience. So the journey of myself being trans woman is as difficult as any other trans person in the country right now. There are strong stereotypes, stigma, discrimination present for seeing a trans person in a very specific way. So I left home when I was studying engineering. There was transphobic behavior present in my university. I couldn't able to sustain my well-being, so I went in depression and bed paralyzed for 1 year. So there are lots of hurdles, lots of bad situations which I faced in my life, but I am so in gratitude that I am sitting besides you talking about this topic. So the journey was very tough, there is no doubt, but from the victim to protector is a beautiful journey.
So I want to ask you, what is the Tahaffuz program in Rawalpindi Police and how is it helping other trans women?
Tahaffuz is an initiative taken by Mr. Muhammad Ehsan Yunus, City Police Officer, Rawalpindi Police. So, what happened exactly? Rawalpindi Police was facilitating the poor people in the first wave of pandemic COVID-19. This man observed that transgender community is really in need for positive discrimination or special kind of intention. So this man built this whole initiatives, this whole project to protect, in police. Uh, um, so it happened, and then the whole building built up on this whole concept. So, Tahaffuz, what is Tahaffuz? Tahaffuz is a platform where transgender community comes directly. They don't go to any police station now. They come to us, they come to me.
Wonderful.
Yes, we provide a comfortable environment because I'm a transgender woman and they are transgender as well. As like a woman can understand the issues of a woman better,
Exactly.
it's just like a trans woman can understand the issues of a trans woman better. So they come to me, they talk with me comfortably. There is a specific language present in Khwaja Sara culture, which is not understandable to any other gender, either man or women. So they come to me and they talk whatever the language they want to talk in. So I listen them, I take the applications of them, I involve the concerned police station.
Wonderful.
And then the police station, the investigation officer from that police station comes to me in Tahaffuz, in the boundary of, in the protected boundary of Tahaffuz. They come in, they arrest the suspect or whatever the legal process is. They come in the Tahaffuz and we investigate the whole situation under the protection of Tahaffuz,
Okay,
in the presence of myself. So trans community is celebrating this whole initiative because we are successful. It's been 14 months. So we are kind of successful to protect transgender community in Rawalpindi district at least.
Wonderful. Finally, we can see that trans people are also given the platform that they should be given, and that Rawalpindi police took this initiative, and I hope that other police stations as well across Pakistan also take these initiatives because they're also very important. Now, coming back to you, Nighat, you talked about the criminal justice system. You're a lawyer yourself. You're also an activist who pioneers and who talks about women empowerment a lot. So I want to ask you, what are the flaws in our criminal justice system? We have our constitution, which protects the rights of women. We have so many other bills and acts that have been passed as well, including the domestic violence bill, which is still being contested, unfortunately, right now, the protection of women in workplace, the cyber protection of women in cyberspace, etc., etc. So many laws that are passed. What is the issue? Is there a gap between the legislature being passed and the implementation, or do we have a flaw in the legislature itself?
Right. So, Taiba, I think when we talk about the gaps in the criminal justice system, what we feminists demand from state is basically the overhaul, change in the criminal justice system. We are not talking about making more laws because, to be very honest, the kind of laws that we have or the amendments that were passed in 2016 around sexual assault or rape provisions in the Pakistan Penal Code. We now also have like a rape ordinance. We have Prevention of Electronic Crimes Act to deal with the cyber crimes against anyone in the country. We have a Domestic Violence Act, by the way, in all provinces. The one that is being contested at the moment, and there is this whole thing going on in resisting that particular legislation, is just for Islamabad. So I think it's also very important to make it clear that that particular bill is for Islamabad, and provinces already have their domestic violence laws. And the third one is, like all women-related laws. I mean, even the Transgender Protection Act that we have, and I believe Pakistan is the only country in South Asia which, and maybe Reem can talk more about this, but it's a good progressive law. The problem is that we have all these laws, but where is the implementation? Making these laws or enacting these laws is just not enough. What we are seeing is that the laws are not being implemented. the way it should in its true spirit by the law enforcement. And by the law enforcement means that your police, your cybercrime wing in Federal Investigation Agency, and then the courts, the trial courts. The first step for anyone to go to any courts is the trial courts, the session courts or the civil courts. But when your judiciary, the lower judiciary, is not really trained in terms of like interpreting those laws in a good way or developing good jurisprudence, I mean, there is no use of these laws then. So I really feel and very strongly feel we don't need more laws. Yes, we need amendments in existing laws, but we really need to look into our law enforcement, where we can bring change. We need structural change, and we really don't want performative change on social media, on mainstream media, that we have done this, but then where we are heading in terms of long term change that we want to see in this society.
Exactly. So you talked about how law enforcement agencies should be given the enforcement, the will to, and the motivation as well to protect the women as well. We see that there's a lot of behavior, unfortunate behavior in the police stations. The people who are in the higher authorities, they are doing what they can. But unfortunately, the lower officers, they're not trained enough. So what do you suggest could be done in order to ensure that their behavior, the intrinsic patriarchal behavior, does not come into into their practice? So I want to ask you, how to train those, because we want to look at how to go forward. So how should we train them? What should we do as a society, and not just as a society, but also on the higher up levels as well?
Definitely we need to have more gender sensitization trainings with police, and not just with the police officials with lower ranks. We need to have like police officials with higher ranks. And in the past, we cannot really say that the higher officials haven't said anything which sort of perpetuated the existing patriarchal norms. We have seen that happen, and what that does with the law enforcement or with the larger society is enforcing those patriarchal norms. We are saying irresponsible statements, and then of course when the higher ups are doing this, the lower staff will be following the same suit, right? I mean, we cannot solely with these gender sensitization training achieve what we want to achieve. So I think that's one thing. But also, Tayyiba, I strongly feel we need resources. What are Because my work with the cybercrime wing and the cyber harassment helpline that we run, we closely work with cybercrime wings across Pakistan, which comes sort of under federal investigation agencies. Honestly, they don't have resources, right? So sometimes they don't have resources, sometimes they don't have will to follow these cases. But resources are very important. Like, we cannot expect from these police officers or officials to go and do things and do inquiry while like putting their own money into like filling up petrols into the vehicles. So that kind of resources we are talking about, they don't have like advanced forensic systems in place. We only have one Punjab forensic lab in Punjab, which is the good role model for the entire Pakistan, but we only have one. So it's like we are talking about lots of things, resources, but at the same time, we just cannot expect that the lower or ranks of officials will change their behavior and things will change. No, we actually need the leadership to be changed, and make an example when these cases come, and what kind of statements or what kind of actions that they are doing while dealing with such cases.
Okay, perfect. So going on to you, Reem. Now I want to ask that, are there any laws which protect the trans community for our audience? How do they protect the trans community, and are they being implemented, seeing that you have you belong to the Rawalpindi police as well, you're a victim officer over there. So are there any laws? Are they being implemented?
So as Nighat told this, the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2018, yes, it is present in the country.
And very progressive, as she said,
yes,
as well.
It is really progressive, and it provides Pakistan a special soft corner in around the world. Around the world, it is said that Pakistan is a landmark country which has been recognized their trans community as third gender, as equal citizen. But I will talk about the situation about the whole country. The implementation is little low. there is no doubt in it. The implementation is little slow, but the initiatives or the as I told you, Rawalpindi police took this initiative, Tahaffuz, and Tahaffuz is directly implementing this law, because police is law and enforcement agency, so it's directly implementing the this law. In Rawalpindi district we are successful, but there is need of replication of Tahaffuz in all over the country, right? Let's suppose there are lots of issues in KP for transgender community. There are lots of murder which happened in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. If there is no specific, though there is no exclusive point where the transgender community go and tell the and relax, comfortably tell the situation what happened with them. Police mind setup is the same. Before joining the police, a police officer, a male police officer is belonging to the society, and he keeps the same thoughts about a transgender person. So a transgender person can only facilitate a transgender person.
Exactly.
It's just like this, it's just like when a there is 2% woman representation in police. A woman can listen a woman better. So I always say this thing, there is a need of replication of Tahaffuz around the country, and there is need to hire more transgender person in that initiatives around the country to make transgender community more comfortable.
Okay, perfect. So you talked about how society is also a very intrinsic part. We were talking to Nighat as well. She said that laws are already present, but we need implementation of laws. So I want to ask you, how do we ensure that there's empathy within the society for the trans people? Do you think that we can bring empathy in the society for trans people? Are there any ways?
Yes, there is always possibility for, if you really want to facilitate or uplift any community. It's not just about trans community, it's about women, it's about especially abled person, it's about any other community present in Pakistan. If you really want to work on upliftment of that community, you have to you will find the ways. So I always say positive discrimination should be present in each and every platform. Just like Multan, in Multan there is first transgender school which is open currently. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government specified 2 specific seats in BRT. So I always say with the discrimination which is positive, which should be positive, with exclusive community which is excluded from many years, you should take some positive or effortful initiatives to uplift that situation.
Perfect, wonderful, thank you. Okay, Nighat, going back to you, why are there so many cases that are unreported? Why do women not come up? Why do trans people do not come up to report the cases?
I think the kind of behavior or response that they receive from the first responders, which basically are law enforcement. But I would also say that things are changing, right? And as Reem is saying, I'm so proud and honored to share a space with her, that she is somebody who is working in this this part of Tahaffuz thing with the Rawalpindi police. But to be very honest, people like Reem and the initiatives like Tahaffuz are very less across the country. And I think women do not trust. Trans people do not trust. They are scared that they will be victim blamed, they will be slut shamed, and the entire onus of proving what happened to them will actually come on them, and they will have to prove that, or else this is what has happened, this is what had happened to me, and now I have to also provide an evidence. And I think we really need to focus on what first responders do, and definitely that's the police, but also like how we can, if there are some good initiatives, or if really there is a focus to change the system, then we really need to talk about that how police is responding. I mean, there is this one police officer in Islamabad. I'll just name her because I'm really proud of the work she's doing, Amna Beg. And she's active on social media. People can reach out to her, but we need more of them, right? So people need this trust with the criminal justice system, not just with law enforcement, that yes, we will go to them and we will not be victim blamed and our complaint will be listened to and will be reported. But also, I think it's a longer process. And honestly, Taiba, we really need to work hard, and everyone needs to, look into their responsibility. The society, the law enforcement, the civil society organization, the government. No one can do this thing in isolation, because we are talking about changing the mindset of the society or the structural change. And a structural change in the society cannot happen with just government or state efforts. Of course, we can push them, but also need to identify our own, role in this. One more thing, Taiba, that I wanted to add that Reem was talking about. I think it's really important. Sorry, the thing that you basically initially asked about, the Khadija case. I think there is another aspect to this also. We as a society really need to think that what exactly we are doing, or the law enforcement is doing, in terms of rehabilitation of criminals, right?
Exactly.
So when they are convicted, they go to the jail, they complete their imprisonment, or initially, eventually they will have to come out of the jail, right? So what exactly the process took place when they were in jail?
There's no
The
psychological
the rehabilitation
unfortunately.
process, and when they are coming out of jail, what exactly we are doing? Are they, going to scot free? And then the victims and survivors will be scared of their lives, that, oh, I fought for this case and now the person is out, what I'm going to do about this? So I think they're like all these points that we really need to think about, and also need to think about the convicts rehabilitation process as well, because of course not all of us want that, oh, this person should be hanged. No, that's not how civilized societies evolve. We want a rehabilitation so that, not just the convicts get to, like, they get a chance to come back to the society and become part of the society. At the same time, what kind of young the generation we are sort of bringing up at the moment, so they know that if something happened to them, at least they will have an opportunity to come back and be part of this society, if we have any process in place for them.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us, Nighat. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio, Reem, Sharif. So we were talking about gender-based violence. We were talking about how, unfortunately, women, also trans people, are inflicted with violence. Some people say there's a femicide going on. Is there a femicide going on or not? We have to see. Statistics show that there might be. There is a pandemic going on, not just in Pakistan, but in the entire world. There's a report that says that 1 in 2 women around the world will once experience gender-based violence in their entire life. This is alarming, ladies and gentlemen. This is alarming because we have to stand against this. We are the ones who are victims here. We are the ones who are survivors here. All of us together. Some people bring in Islam. To them, I would say that if you read the Quran, you will never perpetrate violence against women or the trans people. Why? Because gender-based violence is something which is very, very wrong, and that has been termed in the Quran as well. You're not allowed to raise your finger or your hand on a woman as well. So there was a girl who was Jewish, and she said that I want to read the Quran, I want to understand the Quran. So she went to a sheikh and she asked him that why is there so much violence against Muslim women by Muslim males? And the sheikh said that because they do not read the Quran. So the thing is that if you bring Islam into this, that is something which you have to think about again. We're talking about gender-based violence. We will continue to talk about gender-based violence until we know that we have made an impact and we're trying to bring a movement against this, because this is our society. We have to cleanse it from patriarchy, from misogyny, and from xenophobia as well. And xenophobia not just against different ethnicities, but also against trans people. This is Tayyaba Nisar Khan. Thank you for watching this special show on gender-based violence. Take care.